record this meeting. We have our syllabus, calendar, and more. A picture of me below. Syllabus, course information. And this class is different than CAD, and it's just a huge combination. It's kind of like 108, where I've combined the calendar into the syllabus. It's a one-stop shop.
Are you talking?
Yes. Can you hear me, Gabe? I'm not hitting mute or anything. So
now I can hear you.
let me try plugging it into a different port. Yeah, I'm going to trade with this student because I know Cheryl said one of these breaks. Let's see. Okay, so I switched headsets with the student. We're going to see if it's just the headset. Can everyone hear me now? Can you hear me now? Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so we'll see. I have the syllabus open. Hopefully this corrects it. In the syllabus, it's a one-stop shop for everything you need, your calendar, explanations of the quizzes, all in one place. So course content. The topical areas of study include the study of prehistory through modern periods, which includes historical and social considerations, design concepts, motifs, architecture, interiors, furnishing and decorative arts, gardens and landscapes, historical influences, historical designers, artists and architects. We have our wonderful textbook, and I really do mean wonderful. I've gone through, when I was a student here, there were 2 different books in the time I was there. We didn't have this one, but I think this one is the most comprehensive, easy, and best ordered book I've ever experienced. So really do take the time to read it more than just that initial understanding to answer questions on the quiz, because it's wonderful in expanding your knowledge. References, these are just extra things because we all have so much free time on our hands if you want to read some added content. A History of Interior Design, which was the design book I had when I went through.
You just cut out.
Weird. I want to try switching. But it's just so in... Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Keep letting me know. It's so strange because it worked all the way through AutoCAD, so I don't know what the problem is, if it's just the computer I'm at. Maybe it's like you're talking too fast. We're going to cut you off. So, extra reads for your many minutes of free time. Recommended supplies and equipments. I had some people ask me about things like French curves. Really just know basic things that you'd have for drafting and nice clean drawings. We're going to be doing a couple elevations, some floor plans, some geometric drawings of abstracted things. So not a ton, not every assignment is drawing. You don't need specifically a French curve. You could freehand your curves for this class. They're more just supplies to draw in general. Our sessions are online. You should have a headset, hopefully one that works, unlike mine. I've included the drop deadlines with the 100% refund dates within our attendance policy. So homework assignments and quizzes are posted each week. The 8 weeks that are available to you now, if you really wanted to, you could work right through them. I've updated all of the due dates for everything. I've updated all of the quizzes to be shorter versions than the last semester. So everything's ready to go. You could work ahead, and then I have the other 8 weeks ready. So if for some reason you get past these 8 weeks, I just usually do up to a break, and then I can turn on the other 8 weeks. There's really not much setup left for me. Grading criteria for this class is the lower scale, not a grade class. So 90 to 100 is an A, 80 to 89, 70 to 79 a C, 60 to 69 a D, and F is a retake. So our grade point breakdown, we can look at the different assignments. So when it says visual, that's your main visual assignment for the week. And then you have as many quizzes as are listed. So this is a little different. There's some areas where I felt like, for instance, session 4. It says Renaissance visual, but there's a lot of quizzes, so I might just do the quizzes. I'm at a standstill. I did make the last session I have do both the visual and the quizzes. I did shorten these even shorter than some of these earlier quizzes, but it might be enough work for that week on top of your other classes. But every week is pretty well laid out for you. We have so many chapters to cover in this book, so there gets to be quite a few in some of these weeks. It's a lot of reading. The quizzes are really straightforward. Okay, so there's two different approaches to the visual assignments and quizzes. Quizzes, straightforward. I had somebody last semester tell me in their comments on the quiz, this is monotonous and not creative. And my response was, that is the point. Well, it's not meant to bore you, and hopefully you enjoy the content. You should be using the added memory of typing something you've already read to reinforce what you're learning. History really is memorization of a lot of information. So what I have done in order to make things better in this class is taking quizzes that used to be 20 questions long, each ending in an essay of about a page and a half. And you can imagine when you have this many quizzes, that's a lot of work. And I have shortened them to only include the following questions, and some of them not even this many questions. I don't need you to get fancy. You can copy the text.
Are you talking still?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
No problem. So I don't need, we'll get through it. I don't need your quizzes to be fancy. They can be word for word. I want complete sentences, but just answer this, and this will become clearer in your reading. The section will be labeled motifs. You tell me the motifs for the given period, and the question will really help you know exactly where in the text you're looking. Just give me the information. It seems kind of monotonous, but such is history on this part of it. Visual assignments, that's your time to get creative. That's the time that I've put into coming up with some really interesting opportunities in different learning styles. So there will be some drawing and rendering, coloring. There'll be some research opportunities without any type of drawing. There'll be some presentation board formats where we pretend that we have clients from the future. There'll be lots of interesting things. If you've taken Cheryl's materials class, where she had some really fun projects, there's good fun projects in this class, as well as the necessary quizzes, which can get a little bit monotonous, okay? But I just want to reinforce this, because if you know these basic ideas, you've got it all down. We're just slimlining the process, okay? There again is our important dates. Here is our calendar included within our syllabus. It'll tell you each of the study areas and what assignment is due and when it is due. All right, so all this available for you. Our final project, I was just telling them, my student was helping another student, calendar's inside and it tells you the due date. So it'll tell you the day it's due and the time it's due and what is covered under the session. Final project, can you hear me?
Hello, Professor?
Yes?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
On the quizzes, you said word for word. Does that mean we can copy what's out of the book?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Word
All
for
right.
word.
Word for word. Thank you so much.
You don't...
I was doing the first quiz and, you know, trying to rearrange words and stuff.
Nope. But don't waste your breath. That's silly. I don't need that. I need to know that you just found it. You were able to read with comprehension, found the answer, and reinforce it by typing it one more time. That's what I'm looking for.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I'll save those crazy quizzes where you have to think really hard for my AutoCAD class.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
That makes my life easier. Sorry.
No problem. Okay.
I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of introduction problem loading. So we can use books for quizzes, right? When we do quizzes.
Yes, ma'am. You can use the book for quizzes, and then let's say it says, what were the popular motifs of the early ancient times? Then there'll be a section in your book that says motifs of the early ancient times, and you can copy that word for word. I'm looking to see that you could find the place in your reading and then that you're retyping what those motifs are to reinforce your learning. It doesn't have to be fancy. You can copy it word for word.
Great, thank you. That makes my life much more easier because that
yeah.
was scary.
Yeah, no, it doesn't make sense for something where you want to get the facts right to make you try and reword it just so the silly instead of saying he wore a lovely green cap. You're like, well, it was a beautiful kind of greenish hat that he had. I don't need that. I just need exactly what you found. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
But you know, Professor,
Mhm.
some people would say that's plagiarizing, though. You know
So
what I mean?
it's not, now we'll get into plagiarism on visual assignments.
Okay.
When it is
Okay.
a research project and you
Mhm.
are forced to tell me what you're citing, okay, so I'll say, let's do
Okay.
research on the Basilica of St. Peter's. And then you'll look it up. You'll need to list the sites that you found your information. And my best way of thinking about plagiarism at the very most basic level is 2/3 of the words from the original words need to change to be your own. If you have any question whether you're plagiarizing, that's the best way. Fraction is a good way to think of it. 2/3 different from what you found originally. And that should be a good gauge. So, but quizzes are just not that. That's not the tool. They're meant as repetition and you saying, okay, the colors were green, red, blue. There's no other way to say that for the quiz that's just showing me you knew those were the colors of the time.
Okay.
But we will. I'll check for plagiarism. Don't you worry. We've got that.
Okay.
So, what? Yeah, Gabe says I'm pretty good at it. Yes, I'm a little stickler for it. Some might say crazy. So I will be watching for it. So just be careful of it. And I will give you a warning. It's not going to be a first time strike and you're out completely. I'll probably give you 2 warnings, but just don't make it a pattern. And you might not know you're plagiarizing. I've had people who clearly don't know or they think they changed enough and it was just not enough. But I'll give you warnings and we'll talk through what needs to work. So those were the really important things. Your calendar is found within here. It will match up with the due dates that are found in the class sessions, tons of reading, quizzes, word for word is okay, visual assignments different. This class, we don't have a ton of time. Golly, we don't have a ton of time. So I should really probably get to the actual history portion of it. So whatever my lecture is will be what you're going to be reading. So this week you'll be reading Precedents after seeing my lecture on precedents, China and Japan. We have, I don't like to only have a PowerPoint that covers your reading. You'll be like, I had your building system quiz. Yes, you do. But in this class, we have some great content that was set up and selected by Professor Kent, who does the permaculture. So I like to throw in a lot more about garden landscape design of the periods that you don't read about to give you some supplemental knowledge just for the time. And then I'll do a little bit on the motifs and things found in your reading. Sometimes we'll have some fun quizzes, which at the beginning where it's just kind of like a Jeopardy round where I'll hope your books are closed and we go over some things that we've learned in the previous weeks in a fun format. So it should be an interesting class, should learn a lot. Let's go back to class sessions and see what we have outside of normal session weeks. So this is all first session reading assignment. If you haven't bought your book yet, I did include our design chapters, the introduction, chapters 1, 2, and 3. Notice that's only a week's worth of reading. So do not rely on this as a crutch to get you into weeks 2 or 3, just because there's 3 chapters. Other resources that we have, they're just really fun, different things. So a history of American architectural styles.
We just lost you.
We just lost you.
All right. I'm good? So can you hear me now?
Hello?
So some people are good and some people aren't good. It's really strange.
Hmm.
All right. I'm here. So I think some people can hear me here, and hopefully the recording is covering it. We have all of these different things, like American furniture, for example. These are just supplemental readings on the history to help you understand the timeline and chronology. Here we have early American, American Georgian, post-federal. So fun extra documents. You're not required to read them. I might bring up some of them later to go in tandem with our reading, but the required readings will be found in the sessions. I click on our session. Here we have our visual assignments, what I'll discuss at the end, and then the chapters coincide with the actual quiz numbers. So quiz 1, Introduction, Precedents, Chapter 1. Quiz 2, Chapter 2, China, and quiz 3 is on Japan. And then here are my lectures, which will become available to you the weeks that I give them. So I'm going to start by opening this PowerPoint. Which will be on precedents. Another word for precedents is early ancient civilizations. So precedents in East Asia. So this is directly out of our book, and I really just think it helps us understand history in general in the framework of interior design, or environmental design, I should say. There are various approaches to the study of design history, whether architecture, interior design, and furniture, or a combination. Art history uses works of art, such as painting, sculpture, architecture, furniture, ceramics, and metals, to study the past. Its formalistic method follows chronology and stylistic development to grasp the meaning of works of art, and by extension, a society or people. Architectural history follows a similar pattern through its study of building. Its method addresses buildings primarily through their individual histories, functions, owners, architects, styles, sittings, materials, construction methods, and contextual environments. Material culture looks specifically at human-made objects as transmitters of ideas and values of a society or a group. Objects made by a society may include tools, furniture, textiles, lighting that may be in high style or vernacular. Design history studies artifacts, materials, form, and function. Interior design historians bring a unique approach to design history by integrating the relationship of architecture and interiors into the context of history and design analysis. To accomplish this, the art history, architectural history, material culture, and design history approaches are merged and used as they relate to considerations of research, programming, concept, function, overall aesthetic principles and elements, as well as meaning and intent. So this is just a great way of saying our job has a really high value. Like in one day, I'm in charge of so many aspects of the environment that I'm a part of, whether that's the materials that I'm using, the overall ergonomics of my chairs that I'm sitting in, the complete environmental functioning of the envelope of the building, and how we're controlling the processes to help us better have greater sustainability. We have a very important role in history, and in restating this history for us, we can understand how people lived the way they did and why, according to their architecture. So we have historical and social aspects. We have originally, at the times of Stonehenge and the Slough Caves, gathering and hunting, organizational. We have hunting following herds, organized food production, such as having to move because of exhausting a resource. We have villages on migration paths near water sources, trade and diversification, and herding, still at a subsisting level. So the main intent of that sentence is to say they hadn't really focused on agriculture yet and really planting their roots. So most of their homes, most of the tools that they had, the food that they did have was either they were following a herd of cattle from one place to the other and using that as their food source until they exhausted it and then finding another herd of cattle, or completely exhausting one resource if it wasn't a living resource like a type of grass or plant or berry until it was gone and moving on to the next spot. Everything was very transient. We have the concepts mostly that we see depicted in images and even in the built forms reflecting nature and spirituality. The most pertinent motifs were the circle, the sun, moon, an idea of energy, eternity, magic. We have a spiral that's representative of rain, prosperity, and fertility. We have a swastika, which is meant to show the change of seasons, life-giving or destroying. Animal forms, which represent dead spirits, and human figures, which were mostly important ancestors. And sometimes you just have an arbitrary body part or a handprint. That was probably them just testing out different methods and uses of paint within a given cave. So architecture. Here we see a little bit of the progress of architecture as it went. Now, part of it has to do with location. So you work with what you have around you. In this case, we have kind of this pine and nettles with the windbreaks that they're making use of the trees and fallen branches. Most of the time, they wouldn't even cut branches. They'd be looking for things that had fallen to the ground because their tools weren't as developed as they needed to be in order to get true cuts. And then they were just layering on top and thatching across pieces of grass and then layering another layer of these nettle and pine needles over the top of that. The Native American teepee, extremely transient. It's meant to have the sticks that can be broken down with ropes and then carried on backs or in tandem with animals and tied. The canvas would wrap to enclose the sticks, which is much more thoughtful than this. So this was like a one-time use. We knock it down and then we have to rebuild it. At least this, they had an eye towards how can we reuse a material that we've spent time to, usually in the case of hides that they were creating their canvas or coverings from, not have waste of those things, and how can we compact them and carry them all at once together, because we do have to move so often. So a little bit of development in the thinking. This was fairly rudimentary, and part of it is just location. This was more based off of traveling with their food. Stone structures. Stone structures are very rare to see them like this, where we have many layers of stones atop each other and smaller stones. They didn't really have, like I said, tool development in the ancient precedented times so as to cut and get fine corners, mitered edges, or even the thin type of work in here that they'd have to connect things. Mostly we'd see, like we did in that earlier slide of Stonehenge, larger slabs of rock that were slated together. So, structural features. We have interweaving construction, flexible materials like grasses and fronds, vines and twigs, or strips of interwoven for coverage, vegetation combined with animal hides, double-purpose long twigs of teepees to help move. They also had post and beam construction, which we saw with the Stonehenge. So we have our posts and a beam going over the top, and sometimes that would be in timber form, so larger wooden members. Two vertical members supporting a horizontal member. Machu Picchu is also a good example of this. The posts may be groups of branches, logs, or walls of earth, stone, which are covered with smaller sticks and foliage. We have masonry, that's less common, limited tensile strength of materials, and lack of stone shaping tools. Floor plans. All right, so their floor plans were mostly based off of function as opposed to having any type of beautiful aesthetic to them. So based on nature, roof, wall openings, we have plans that are round or irregular. They had smaller footprints and expansion was only function based. We have rectangular plans that come about based on the size of the taper log. So they would adjust things where they don't have the tools to cut. They'd say my log is at this extent and therefore where it stacks is going to be the end of the size. As families grow, protection becomes more necessary from outside threats and functions become divided, and these structures grow in height and length. So that we can see with the Pueblo dwelling, where we start having this commonality of a city almost. At first we had these scattered, more movable types of architecture, and now we have almost this wall of apartment complexes, like the earliest apartment complex, if you will, so that they can make it function as a safe environment for the overall populace. To the side I have a diagrammic illustration of an underground house of North American Marmara people, which shows an entrance tunnel, number one, leading from the surface. So it's coming up from here and going down in. And then it has stables for a donkey and a goat, leading down into the central courtyard to the open sky. So you're going down and underground, but there is an open sky element to this courtyard in here, which we would have for collecting water. They have the protection of going down to keep it safe. They have added spaces for their goats and donkeys to store food sources. we have individual bedrooms and other rooms, granaries for food, a kitchen tunneled into the surrounding ground with steps leading to some rooms, and a cistern for the collecting the water, which is why they leave the open space above in the center. Color. So, based on nature's provisions only, earth, plants, animal, and byproducts, and stone. There weren't a lot of complex dyes at the time. That would come later on. Floors. Set buildings made of packed earth. If you have a hot, rainy climate, we might see more raised bamboo or timbers used, as we'll see in Japan and China. Nomadic hides or woven rugs. For the walls, we had rarely covered or treated based on available materials for the exterior. For windows and doors, windows as we think of them today, not at all common. Door opening left in the structure, orientation based on the sun and wind. Woven mats at the first window covering, as the first window covering / hides. And windows, if they were included, were just holes. And most often, for a long period of time, they didn't have coverings at all for them. Ceiling was purely structural system, and it was the space directly below for storage to protect from animals. And textiles were natural grasses woven into rugs and window coverings that came about with the introduction of the backstrap loom, which I'm showing in the first image below on the left. And smaller pieces of cloth and hide, leather embossing, raffia, cut pile embroidery, and applique. So here is a picture of the true loom, and here is a picture of the ancient depiction of the loom. All right, so furnishing and decorative arts. I just included this slide because I want to talk about relevance today. It's easy to read what we have and you say, oh, Allison, why am I doing this? Because it doesn't mean anything to me now. I mean, it's great and all. We do have, when we get into things that are more Romanesque, we still see a lot of that in our cities, even in Chicago. So we'll see a lot of classical architecture, and I'm sure you can see the relevance. But thinking about ancient societies, I'd say now more than ever, we're seeing a comeback in the patterns and type of materials that were used. If you walk into Target right now, go back to the pillow section, you're going to just be overloaded with woven right now. You're going to be overloaded with tribal everything. So it's in, and patterns repeat themselves. History repeats itself in the way that we even do architecture. Sometimes we're going back to the classical foundations of architecture for our built environments because they had it right, and somehow we felt that technology would make it better, and it just hasn't. So this class is very relevant, and I've just included some examples of mud cloth patterns in current fashion trends that I found online. Below that, I have an example of molas and kente cloth, which to the right you can see I've included Maharam Fabrics. And Maharam Fabrics is one of the leading fabric providers for contract furniture. Very relevant now. I used to use them all the time in contract design office environments. And right now they have a fabric that includes cave scenes that can be bought for modern environments. It says the Wiwa stories depict the plight of 11 members of Wiwa ethnic group, indigenous community living in Colombia's remote Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta mountain range, where they were struck and killed by lightning while performing a traditional universe balancing ceremony in 2014, which seems completely random, but they've based off of the concept of starting with this people and their culture, this beautiful woven pattern line. So I want to include a lot more of how is this relevant for me today so that you can see that it is truly important and just how beautifully done it can be with technology. So the difference between the time it took to use that breaking loom and the technology to create this beautiful woven pattern, not by hand but with a machine, is amazing. Maybe we'll take a look at those machines later. I have a really funny, I can't wait till we get to the PowerPoint and discussion on how I think wallpaper printing changed the world of women forever. All right, so here were my references. Most of everything that you'll find in this PowerPoint outside of my reference to Maharam was directly from our book or from an earlier book, The History of Interior Design by Pyle. Okay, so this was just precedence. We're moving on to a second PowerPoint. Gabe got excited that we were done for today. All right, so let's see. If we go into here, into my lectures, precedence is pretty short. There's not a lot outside the relevance of woven and how important it is still now that I can relate to us. So I'd like to move on to sacred gardens in China and Japan. This is where you see some of the lovely work that Professor Kent does, and I've added some other slides of my own on top of it. But it'll add just another layer to your reading to see the whole built environment. When I was here as a student, I'm doing this speech as it loads in the corner, we were still interior design. When I came back to teach, we had changed to environmental design because really we should be thinking outside in, whole built environment, whether it's our yard or the interior of our home as well. Everything should be cohesive. All right, let's get it started. So, cultural presence I talk about, sacred gardens, Chinese design, and Japanese design. Welcome. So why are you here and why is it important? And this is framed in a different concept. A home. A home is a place for, well, survival, protection, security, family, love, sustenance, health, entertainment, recreation, creativity, learning, procreation, peace, retreat, so on and so forth. We don't have enough time. Different times, different priorities. So we'll get to see the development of how we've always valued these things, but just in a different progress of the time. Economy, politics, religion, technology all impact how we deal with those things that we love so much. And intellect versus emotions. We'll see those go back and forth, what we value, intellect and symmetry versus emotions and romance. Different locations and different resources will also have an impact of the architecture present. Different times, different priorities, protection of animals, marauders, the elements. Porches had thick walls, few windows, and floor plans. Once we get food production, we start having fences, water collection, kitchens for cooking. We have immigration, which then lends itself to memory furniture, architecture, color symbols. What do we bring? What do we hold on to? What's precious that we don't want to leave behind? Learning invites science, books, bookcases, and also the idea of math, like the golden section, to give relative proportion. Entertaining, Maslow hierarchy, lower survival, higher enlightenment, love and romance. Technology, cold weather, HVAC, communication. Even we'll see all the transitions for how glass started to become a thing and going from leaded panes to built-in to automatic. Big changes with our technology. What was going on? So just looking at these chairs, we can see how much change we're going to experience as we read through the book. We have bent plywood. They didn't have bent plywood back here. Here they were mostly concerned with who was at the top of this social pyramid, gilding everything in gold, making sure they're telling their story because they didn't have books necessarily. It took forever to write. It was easier to do pictures that gave an overarching idea. We get into great craftiness of different periods and the ability to cut woods in special ways and add intricacies, or lovely 80s looking chair. It's like the Saved by the Bell came back to haunt us. Let's see. Yes, Lisa. Wait, Lisa?
Yeah, Lisa, it doesn't matter.
Okay. That would be fine. It is recording right now, so it should be available for you to watch later.
How will I get access? Just through the email? You will send link or something?
So you'll go to the class session, and right when you click on the session folder, it'll say link to video, and you'll click on it and you'll be able to watch it from there.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So lots of changes through time, some good, some bad. Know your history, mastering your craft. So we have to be masters of our craft. We want to know when electricity was installed in homes, plumbing, gas. When was concrete first used? When was glass used? When was the HVAC developed? why was the city at the center and how did the city grow and what helps us to date neighborhoods. It's really fun just to be that person who can walk around a neighborhood and name off all the different types of colonial buildings versus such and so forth, Cape Cod, onward, so forth. Travel as much as you can. Oh, I wish I had traveled more. Now I'm locked into Indiana forever. Learn French or Latin. I do know Latin, so I have that going for me. All right. This is just an interesting link on how religion spread, and it just helps us think about development of different architecture. Each period, so we have historical and social considerations, design concepts, all of these things will be covered in your book and on your quizzes. Where to begin? In the beginning. So historical needs. This is thinking of the beginning of our garden. Okay, so now we're transitioning in thought from built environment to garden. Places of meditation, refuge from rawness of life, sacred plantings to heal or refresh. We needed enclosed safe space to escape the world. Today's need, we still need places to meditate. We need a refuge where we feel close to wildness of nature amidst all the city and all the technology. We have sacred plantings to heal and refresh, and we need places to share with our company of friends outside of being inside with the television. We have heaven on earth that's going to be represented in the Chinese design with their ancestor gardens. Japanese liked heaven on earth with Zen gardens and harmony of balance. We have Persian and Indians who had geometric symbolism representing the Garden of Eden and the 4 divisions of the universe, and medieval Christians who place enlightenment in a home for the soul. Botanical gardens represented heaven on earth, and I'm going to have to skip through some because this is just a crazy first day, so we have to get through a lot. In the following weeks, it'll be cut down because there's no intro to me. Garden types, there's floral, sacred, farm, private pleasure gardens, paradise gardens. We have walled gardens, which represent more of the Garden of Eden, the Elysian fields that are represented in the Odyssey. We have the importance of location. Consult the genius of the place and all that tells the waters to rise or fall. There is a huge argument that you'll see go on throughout the semester of location and how it's determined. Do we build around the house to make the house look good, or is it that we should build our house to fit the environment surrounding it? It goes back and forth over time. Garden types. What kinds of gardens to create? Domestic, animal and plants, spiritual, religious, estate gardens and villas. It really depends on how much foraging and what period of time we're thinking about, and also the location. Aesthetics, how to shape gardens. Grids that are logical and identifiable. We have some that are made out of the Pythagorean theorem. We have Palladio's forms of goodness, justice, and harmony using the circle and square. And we have how to shape gardens, type of diagram and garden styles, domestic, palace, hunting park, we'll talk a lot about those, paradise, medieval, landscape. Civilization, so under primitive conditions, the cultivation and design of gardens could only begin when a wandering tribe found a place to settle, and the nomad drove his herds across the open unfenced pastures. When, however, with the aid of the pickaxe, he broke the ground for cultivation and fixed a dwelling place. He was compelled to erect a fence in order to protect his homestead from enemies and wild beasts, and this enclosure, rudimentary as it was, formed the first garden. It was earlier than the farm, which could only be developed after fields had been formed with further fencing. So civilization begins in the warmer countries of the Middle East, Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Persia around 6000 BC. Then from a nomadic to an agrarian culture, so from wandering to actual farms. They learned to harvest water from rivers, melting mountain snow through dams, canals, turning deserts into rich, fertile, and cultivated land, which is absolutely awesome when you really get down to think about it. Water was a life force, critical element in the Chinese Persian Renaissance and Zen gardens. It was delightful in sounds and sight. Trees were symbolic of life and permanence, and any green spot was considered sacred. 2 garden styles developed: vast landscape parks, smaller contained gardens. First gardens were probably useful because they did have access to fruit and vegetables and herbs, and domesticated crops brought wealth and culture. Plants were grown for interest and pleasure and offerings to the gods. So we have China, and while I don't have very much time, just this session, I promise, is crazy. So China, we have an emphasis on Taoism, and these slides will go on, and you can review them in your own time. You don't have to. This is access to your reading. But It's about the individual and the relationship to nature. Confucianism, which focuses on ethics and groups of people, and it promotes the idea that one can attain peace through correct relationships and respect for order and authority. So all of their gardens will reflect that balance and relationship for respect of order and authority. We have the Yunyi gardening tempering. We'll have examples of gardens and their topography. So the 17-span bridge, and I have so many great stories I can't share, but they have balance of, it's 9 on each side of the arches. They thought 9 was the sacred number. And the center stone was what they put in last. They had this great story about a man who had the center stone and it just happened to fit, but I don't have time to tell it to you, so you'll just have to ask me in my lab hours. Ha! I'll make you come to lab hours for history. The Chinese garden, qualities in the yin and yang are very important. Mountain ranges were rough and masculine, the yang, are balanced with soft reflective water, and the yin. And the juxtaposition is the theme that you can see throughout. So yin, yang, rough versus soft. You can see that here in the background of the topography of the giant sharp-edged mountain with the reflective lily pond in front of it and the soft bend of the roof echoed in the architecture. Okay, general ideas only. I'm going to skip way ahead because we have, is this one out at 10? I think it's 7:40. Or I mean 8:40, sorry. So let me skip ahead a little bit. So if we keep going, there's equal reverence for water. Rivers represent the life of arteries of the earth, and mountains were the skeleton. Water is essential to life, so is essential to the artist in his composition. And we don't only see that in the composition of how they're dealing with their gardening techniques. We also see that in some of the slides you can find in here with the watercolor and calligraphy in China and Japan, where they use the different brush strokes. And everything that they have is so cohesive, from their interiors, their exterior architecture, their gardening, with the same type of sweeping gestural movements that they reflect. The Chinese became masters of life-giving water design. Here, if water was not available for a stream or pond, then dry stones could be laid to evoke a running brook. An empty pond was supposed to stimulate the viewer's imagination into conjuring up reflecting mirror water. This was confusing to the Western gardener. So we're all over here like, what? I just don't see it. But they're very much into symbolism and understanding that they're evoking ideas through other concepts. They're working with what they have. The making of the Chinese garden: completeness, disclosure and concealment, wonder and surprise. Oh, do we have a good picture of disclosure and concealment? Okay, so you can kind of see it here. They liked to take big solid slabbed planes and throw a giant cut hole through the center, which then would visually expand as you like walked up to that circle. Then you might have some branches that then expanded into a larger opening to a hanging garden. So it would visually open as you walked through the garden. That's what's meant by that. Oh man, there's not out of time in the world. So, there we go. This is a beautiful representation of that. An entrance into a separate reality, Yipu Garden of the Ming Dynasty. So you cut through here, and then you could walk over the threshold onto this mini bridge, and it'd get more and more open. Then you'd walk over to here, and it'd open even more into this beautiful atrium of flowers. So, kind of fun technique. And these are things that I want you to think about when you're employing a design concept and you get into advanced classes. You can incorporate cool overarching concepts like this. You can say, I walk into the space and I have a wall that has a fountain and I have very small doors, still ADA accessible. Then I walk into the next room. I walk into the next room and then I might have the space expand a little bit by my walking past getting larger, and instead of doors I just have openings that open up into a free-flowing space into a kitchen. So it's fun to see how you're translating history and these really unique concepts into modern ideas. Those are the kind of things we like to see more than it's a beach theme, so I'm going to have some shells in the corner, okay? Really think about it. That's what the point of this class is. Get your mind thinking about those ideas. Wonder and surprise. What beautiful overarching trees, just these thin lines. We just get to see so much of the natural repetition in the landscape that we're hoping to implement in the interiors. And look at the mirroring. I mean, you can't beat the mirroring of the water in Chinese and Japanese cultures. Large and small, they had miniature gardens. On Buddhist temples, they would make these relics and miniature gardens that they'd have in their interior spaces. Anywhere where they can implement some type of reference to the exterior and nature, they would. Oh man, we'll skip forward. These are horrible. I'm going to make sure they're not pixelized next time, but this is representation of the calligraphy that they did in ink drawings. And here's some more of the gardens. These pictures were taken by Professor Kent herself, I believe. She got to travel there and see these beautiful things. Just the detail that goes into some of these. I mean, look at this work, this masonry. It's so beautiful. All right, China, we have to get to Japan. So cool. I've got 10 minutes for Japan. All right. And just to see the bigger picture. I know. It's so uniform. Now, so you can just see the concepts and ideas that went into the architecture and how that reflects on their city, and the idea of yin and yang, the idea of focusing on aesthetics that promote peace through correct relationships and order and authority. So they take a concept and they really stick with it. Restrooms, extremely different. Have any of you experienced this kind of culture? No? Oh, no one's been to China?
No.
History of environmental design, Japanese design. So any remarkable phenomenon, from a splendid tree to a striking rock, from a waterfall to a cliff, can be an object of worship. Where the medieval Europeans saw malignant spirits in every forest and mountain, demanding to be exorcised or subdued, the contemporary Shinto seemed to have felt that the instinctive reverence for every stone, tree, plant, and animal. And they really were two extremely different cultures. So Europeans thought, we want to cultivate this, we want to tear down the trees and make buildings and add, as opposed to the Shinto, who believed that we want to maintain and keep this beautiful nature around us. From the primitive Japanese, the sun, moon, sea, earth, mountains, wells, and springs were imbued with a spiritual quality worthy of veneration and worship. The word niwa, or garden, is used to indicate a piece of ground purified for the worship of the gods. Most religious sanctuaries in Japan, whether Shinto or Buddhist, are preceded with water basins where the visitor can purify with fresh water before entering the sacred realm. Okay, and I don't pronounce these things well, so you can correct me if you know. The ise, the basin is provided with metal dippers from which one may take a sip of the water to rinse one's hands. The fountain at ise is a miniature replica of a typical shrine structure, which is a simple overhanging gable roof resting on smooth cylindrical posts. The basin is hollowed out of natural rock for a typically Shinto rustic appearance. And for Japanese architecture, which I don't think the remaining slides will ever get too much into that, but you'll see lots and lots of timber construction, which is similar to Chinese, but I'd say even more of the open timber construction is used starting in the 5th century. The Japanese are known for the beauty of their construction methods and joinery in natural materials. Let's see if we can't get more pictures. So here you're seeing, this is all under here and it's a little dark. There'd be the timber beaming to all the roof structures, and even on the interior. Can I find an interior picture, or is it all gardens for this run through? The interior would be open beaming on the walls and ceiling also. Here you can see their paradise garden. So those Zen-inspired water gardens and gardens of meditation were intended to conjure up a vision of eternity, as did the Persian Islamic gardens. The paradise garden was more complex, introspective, visually discontinuous, has to be experienced to discrete sections, as one might discover various parts of an imagined paradise. So less structuring, right? It's more of a wandering, meandering path that's not so organized. We don't see a lot of plantings that are designated on the side. It's just natural growth where they've created the paths and footbridges to wander throughout it. Many Zen Buddhist priests studied in China and collected song paintings which influenced the Zen clergy. The Daizen in 1513, dry landscape garden, runs in an L shape around two sides of the temple veranda and is divided by a wall, one side intended for meditation and the other an allegory in simulated mountains, a waterfall and a stone representing a small boat set in a sea of white quartz. And here you can see all of that white quartz. And oftentimes they would have sand implemented inside their garden as well. So we see quartz mounds in the Ryongji, 2 or 3 in each contributing to an esoteric and complex harmony of mathematical relationships. In the moonlight, the white bed is illuminated like a still, glassy sea marked by dark islands where the gods could slumber. And here we just have the placement of that entire quartz garden. And here's what the little vignettes of that would look like. So there were also dry landscapes which had sown sand, quartz, and few trimmed shrubs and small leaf azaleas. The Zen garden art was summed up in the ability to reduce 30,000 miles to the distance of 1 foot. A universe could be packaged into no more than an acre of garden space. The Chinese garden stone was typically pocked with holes and deeply cut by erosion. Japanese preferred smooth, quiet flat forms, and often garden laborers were outcasts without any background or comprehension of the laws of Zen aesthetics, as best prepared to deal with the tabula rasa, the empty space of nature. So here's some example. Here we see a lot of that white space, the stacked mounds and the quartz that meanders through and around. And then it's mixed in with some of these larger plantings and azalea bushes. We have tea gardens, which are small and domestic in scale, intimate ritual of taking tea with 1 or 2 friends in a rustic hut placed in its own ritual landscape. It represents the discoveries of a new concept of the sequence of spatial experiences created by the interplay between house and garden. Where men had served as monks designing temple gardens, they now became tea masters. So here's an example of one of those smaller tea gardens. And there's places to sit and join together and actually participate in the tea rituals. So the tea garden imbued with a quiet spirituality, which was developed in conjunction with the tea ceremony as taught by Sen no Rikyu. It was through the tea garden, which avoided artificiality and was created so as to retain a highly natural appearance, that one approached the tea house. Today's Japanese garden incorporates a number of elements inherited from the tea garden, such as stepping stones, stone lanterns, clusters of trees. The simply designed gazebos in which guests are served tea also have their origin in the tea garden. Am I doing okay? 4 more minutes? Okay. I can go back to Katsura. So as the visitor proceeds, a series of scenes unfolds in the continuous landscape drama: a maple-covered mountain, a promontory on the lakeshore, a bridge leading to a large tea house, while another leads to the Tortoise Island, and in the lake, a small Zen temple. Katsura seems to follow the musical form of a sonata, which the developments of themes, recapitulations, passages of meditation, and a progressing with the rhythm and structure. So it is. It's almost this beautiful landscape that you're walking throughout, and we have changes. When we have the tea garden, we have a simplicity. We have a place that we can join in with friends, and it's very much enclosed. And then that might lead to a footbridge that takes us out into a more open area that's flatter with no plantings. But then we could also have some wall-like structures that have the openings that give us visual harmony and unity into the next area. So they think of this whole thing as almost a sonata of nature. And here's a beautiful bird's eye view of the Katsura. And I love the simplicity of the interior architecture as well. Just basic geometric shapes. They had stroll gardens, which unlike earlier Paradise Garden, were only Buddhist strolls while man quietly observes. At Katsura, man is the hero recreating and reconstructing the garden as he walks through it for his own private enjoyment. His enjoyment, as with the Surhead, is increased as if he has had a classical Japanese education. So it's more about the experience. The concentration and irrationality placed stepping stones make all thought of axial symmetry seem irrelevant and foolish. Unlike buildings sited in Western fashion, which we are forced to face dead-on, Japanese buildings in the stroll garden are approached obliquely, without confrontation. They are organically absorbed into the environment, never as a terminal reference or a focal point. The reference between architecture and the landscape is invariably diagonal, even though this oblique line is implied, rather than stated by walks or paths. So here we have the idea that it should blend in. Our architecture should blend in. And it is interesting to think. We do. We always have, like, my house faces front, my driveway leads to my house, and that's what makes it stand out as the focal point. Just by turning it on the axis and having it be at a diagonal, it becomes less of a focal point, and we would focus on our yards. Many gardens had to be left to deteriorate until German architect Bruno Taut, while fleeing from Nazi Germany, fled to Japan and discovered Katsura and other Kyoto masterpieces. Walter Gropius, we'll talk about a lot later, was also drawn to the pure form of architecture, which had an appeal for the proponents of international modern movement. So this is where we're starting to see the development, and especially when we talk about him later, very important man, into how modern is just an offshoot of things that came before. All right, I want to escape. Don't leave. I'll know if you leave. Although you're allowed to, you can't. Just stay with me for a minute, okay? Let's go back to our precedents in East Asia section, session 1, and take a look at, oh, I heard one of you leave. And we'll take a look at the visual assignment and what goes into that. So for this is the submission link. We have files that you'll use to complete your assignment. So visual assignment, sketching, document. Oh, I hate you. It's so annoying. Okay, so let's see. I think I have to go to downloads for some silly reason because it didn't open. What were you saying it would work, Gabe?
That would work. You can click it, but it would open.
All right, deadline for full credit. This might not be up to date because I updated all the syllabus stuff. So this is really, and I'll post this right after this. Deadline for full credit is 7:30 on Thursday, next Thursday. So the next class period, it's due at the beginning. And it says that on your calendar. It just doesn't reflect it in here yet. So sketching option. This option allows you to use your artistic talents to sketch various items from the area you're studying. The idea is to learn to recognize the design elements and make each civilization's style distinct. For example, how would I know an ancient Roman chair from an ancient Greek one? Although they're similar in appearance, there are some design details that are very different and distinctive. And what are the correct names of those design details? Think about materials, colors, shapes, textures. If the client you hired is redesigning a living room in the Tudor style, what type of furniture items might you recommend? So you have to have access to a scanner in order to really get the best of the option unless you are killer dead on with your above shot photos, and I mean high quality. But we should all have some type of option with a scanner. If you do a photo, make sure it's in good lighting, and we'll just have to talk about it. So you might attempt it. We might want to talk about it in an email first. Suggested media, these are just coloring things. So if you're going to color, use high quality things or just do a really good job of it. I've seen people do great things with Crayola. It doesn't have to be Prismacolor. If you do not have the items listed above, it was just saying you could use other types of Conte. It doesn't have to be crayon. It could be marker, pencil, whatever, paint. You want to give me watercolor, I will accept it. So copy the graphic format onto your computer. And then do the assignment. Below you'll see the topics arranged. And then submit your complete assignment. So we need to choose any two from the list below, one from precedence and one from Japan, and then choose to list from the other list below, one from precedence and one from Japan or China. Yes, so 4 all together. So each of the pages of your assignment, I'm gonna have to correct this because I did grade them on the high scale last year. Okay, so I'm just gonna fix this. I'm gonna stay and fix this. But what you're gonna do, let me show you an instance of somebody who completed theirs. So we have the instructions on this sheet. You can read through them thoroughly. Then within the class session, you also have a rubric, a very intense rubric for the first couple of weeks because people like parameters, okay? So sketch, here's how to get an A on the sketch. Here's how to get an F on the sketch. Read the requirements, that's up to you. Rendering, so quality of rendering is part of the grade. Description is worth a good deal of the grade. So is it identifying the elements of the style? Did you use related vocabulary? Did you use historical information outside of the book? Okay. Grammar and spelling, listing of sources, and so on. So the rubric's pretty clear. And then these points, if you got all of these sections perfect, you'd get an A. But varying amounts will get you different grades, but it all adds up to be the 100. So let's go back. So that's just how I'm grading you. One's the instructions and one's the format provided. Okay, so here's where you would put your image, and here's where you put your description, and here's where you put your source, your name, and session 1. And then once you've done 1, 2, 3, 4, right? 2 from the one list and 2 from this list. Then you can save the file and submit it on the link. So you're submitting this document with 4 sketches and 4 descriptions. And the instructions tell you how long the descriptions are, and the instructions also give you what items you can research, and you pick from the lists. Okay.
So you basically pick from the list and then search it?
Yep. So you pick from the list and then you search the item. So I might pick a Native American teepee, and then up here it talks about like scanning. I know it's in here. It's been a while since last semester. So let's see, JPEG formats. I know it said, give me at least 100 words on the image and what it resembles for that topic, which isn't a lot. And I will post something in the announcements that I had to post after this first assignment last semester about people trying to give me quotes for 100-word count. 100 words is not a lot of words, to be honest with you. So a quote can only be 1/4 of your word count, but I'll have that included in an announcement to follow. And here's an example in the announcements, if you saw it when you joined the class, of a good job. So, yeah, it's Madeline. So Madeline did this last semester, and so you'll find an image and then you are duplicating the image using your rendering skills, mostly matching the color and the idea of the overall image, and then you're giving me the description and some research on it in 100 words. But this is what I'd call good quality. Now, we're not all artists, and that is explained in the session. I know we're not all artists. We're all going to try a number of different learning styles, and we're going to adapt to them. But art is part of this curriculum, and I do expect that we get better at it, and we maintain the skills of hand drafting and drawing and rendering. All right. I'll see you all next week. I'll make sure to update the assignment before I go. Good night.